Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 3, Hiranyakashipu's plan to become immortal, text number 12. Iti Shushruma Nirbandham Tabhak Paramam Astitaha Vidatsvanantaram Yuktam Swayam Tri Bhuvaneshvaraha Iti Shushuma Nirbandham Tabhak Paramam Astitaha Vidatsvanantaram Yuktam Swayam Tri Bhuvaneshvara Shishumama Nirbandham Tabhak Paramam Astita Tatsvanantaram Yuktam Swayam Tri Bhuvaneshvara. Jenske Iti Shushuma Nirbandham Tabhak Paramam Astita Vidatsvanantaram Yuktam Swayam Tri Bhuvaneshvara. Iti. In this way, Shushruma, we have heard, Nirbandham, strong determination, Tapaha, austerity, Paramam, very severe, Astitaha, is situated in, Vidatsva, please take steps, Antaram, as soon as possible, Yuktam, befitting, Swayam, yourself, Shri Bhuvana Ishvaraha, O Master of the three worlds. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O Lord, we have heard from reliable sources that in order to obtain your post, Hiranyakashipu is now engaged in severe austerity. You are the Master of the three worlds. Please, without delay, take whatever steps you deem appropriate. Purport. In the material world, the servant is provided for by the master, but is always planning how to capture the master's post. There have been many instances of this in history, especially in India during the Mohammedan rule. Many servants, by plans and devices, took over the posts of their masters. It is learned from the Chaitanya literature that one big Zamindar, Subudhi Roy, kept a Mohammedan boy as a servant, because he treated the boy as his own child. And sometimes when the boy would steal something, the master would chastise him by striking him with a cane. There was a mark on the boy's back from this chastisement. Later, after the boy had, by crooked means, become Hussain Shah, Nawab of Bengal, one day his wife saw the mark on his back and inquired about it. The Nawab replied that in his childhood he had been a servant of Subudhi Roy, who had punished him because of some mischievous activities. Upon hearing this, the Nawab's wife immediately became agitated and requested her husband to kill Subudhi Roy. Nawab Hussain Shah, of course, was very grateful to Subudhi Roy and therefore refused to kill him. But when his wife requested him to turn Subudhi Roy into a Mohammedan, the Nawab agreed. Taking some water from his water pot, he sprinkled it upon Subudhi Roy and declared that Subudhi Roy had now become a Mohammedan. The point is that the Nawab had been an ordinary menial servant to Subudhi Roy, who was somehow or another able to occupy the supreme post of Nawab of Bengal. This is the material world. Everyone is trying to become master through various devices, although everyone is servant of his senses. Following the system, a living entity, although servant of his senses, tries to become master of the whole universe. Hiranyakashipu is a typical example of this, and Brahma was informed by the demigods of his intentions. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatunde Ve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shrindivadi Paskadyade Satarne. As we know, everyone has come to the material world to be something that we're not. And the main thing we're not is we're not God. And because we're not God, we can never actually become God. But when we want to become God, then we're put into illusion called Maya. And that's where we are now. Now, we may not remember how we got here. We may not even know why innocent soul was put into this material world and is being treated so harshly by the material energy. Why couldn't God have arranged it so that the soul could have been put in a much nicer place without having to go through so much trouble? Well, as we know also, according to the Bhagavad Gita, that the soul is actually not in trouble because the soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of material nature. Despite contact with the material body or Arjuna, the soul is neither doing anything nor is he entangled. Amadidvam nirgunatvat Paramatmayam avyayam shariras dopikontiya nakaroti nan lipute. Now, no one feels like they're not in trouble. In other words, everyone actually believes that they're in trouble, that there's facing great difficulties, old age, disease, and death is imminent, and so many miseries coming from other living entities, from the material energy, the weather, the climate, the earthquakes, from one's own body is giving so much trouble. You can just look around and see all the trouble everyone's body is giving. So everyone feels they're in trouble and takes it very seriously. In other words, everyone is trying to get out of their trouble. But ultimately their trouble is they want to become supreme in this world. But there's only one problem: time. Time doesn't allow anyone to become supreme. Everything has a beginning as well as an end. And therefore, if we could stop time from changing everything, then we'd be God. At least here. We'd have some control. But if we can't stop time from changing everything, we actually have no control whatsoever. Now, it appears that we have some control because I can raise my arms and I can even wave them. And it appears that I have some control. But that's by Krishna's arrangement, so that if a child wants to pretend that he's a cook in the kitchen, but they're only 2 or 3 years old, and they give him a plastic kitchen. And in that way, the child imagines that he's cooking. So we're just imagining that we're doing things. Now, we must be doing something, because otherwise, why are we responsible? If we were not the doer, then we could just blame God for everything. I'm just the observer. I'm just sitting here observing, and God is just doing all these things, and I'm getting the blame for it. But actually, God is not the one who's doing all these things. Although through his material energies, everything goes on by his will. But God's will in the material world, as he says, samaham sarvabhuteshu namaidveshdos dinapriyaha ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham. That I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to everyone. But whoever renders service to me in devotion, he's a friend to me and I'm a friend to him. In other words, everyone's getting the result principally of desires, because we're being confronted or being exposed to so many desires. And we have a choice which desire to fulfill. In other words, the soul has a choice which desires that he wants to manifest in this world. Weak desire is just a thought, stronger desire is a feeling, and the strongest desire is the will to carry out that activity. So in different stages, the soul is held responsible, and generally speaking, when it comes to the platform of doing, willing, desiring to do something, then he's the most responsible. Especially in Kali Yuga, one does not receive the same kind of reaction for thoughts as one gets from activities. There's always some reaction for whatever we think, but as far as accumulating karma, it's only if we're actually doing something in Kali Yuga. Otherwise, we'd all be ashes right now. We actually got the reactions for what we were thinking. So, the soul has the capacity to think, to desire by its free will, and when it desires to go back to the spiritual world, then Krishna arranges it to make the soul can make some spiritual progress. And when the soul wants to entangle itself in material activities in one of the modes of nature, then Krishna makes the arrangements in the material world so the soul can be exposed to those modes of material nature that it's desiring. Now, the primal desire is to become God. And why to become God? To conquer death. To show God that we're not under his control. I'm independent, powerful, happy. I can conquer death. And generally the soul, in order to do that, after many lifetimes, merges in Brahman. And he thinks he's become deathless. Because he was always deathless. And in Brahman, he just experiences no material existence. So therefore he thinks, now I become God, because I'm deathless. Because he doesn't do anything in Brahman except to think he's God, which gets boring after a while. It's quite boring just being God and there's no one to control. So they fall back in the material world to try to become God here again, until they figure out they can't become God here, so they merge back in Brahman. So since time immemorial, we're going up and down like a yo-yo. Sometimes in Brahman, thinking ourselves to be God, and sometimes in the material world, trying to become God. In any case, we haven't made any progress so far, and if we stay around here at time immemorial for now, we still won't make any progress. But we're quite determined. Therefore, many souls will stay here for much longer. So the worst thing you can tell someone, or even imply directly or indirectly, is to tell them they're not God. Therefore, the Krishna conscious philosophy is not very popular sometimes because it exposes the fact that we're not the controller. Even the very thought that our body is changing is repulsive to the soul. As long as we're conditioned to hear that we're changing, is quite shocking. We want to imagine that we're going to be here for a long, 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 long time, and that there's no worries, I'm going to be here for such a long time that what do I have to concern myself with this philosophy for older people? Like, you got to become old and die. Not me. I'm going to be the first one who's going to be young forever, for a long time at least. And I'm sure by the time I get old, the scientists will have conquered death by that time. Surely. When I was younger, there was these comic books, they call them. They're not very funny, but anyhow, they call it, I guess the material in it was laughable, so they called it a comic book. But one of the aspects of the comic book is they had a little advertisement proclaiming that in 50 years from that time, that the scientists would come up with a pill and everyone could take the pill and live forever in this material world. Now, whoever wrote the comic book, whoever wrote that article probably died already. But they have to allure people with this idea, don't worry, you're going to live forever. As Prabhupada said, his experience when he was in the High Court of Calcutta, he had some court case where one of his assistants had sold some morphine or something illegally, and he had to testify. In any case, during that time that he was in the High Court, there was a trial going on, because I guess you have to wait there until your turn comes. And in the trial, one doctor, he had killed his assistant. He turned out that his assistant was having an affair with his wife, and so he called his assistant one day into the operating room, chloroformed him, and cut him into little pieces, or big pieces, I don't know, big and little pieces. And then he put him into a box, and he was taking him out, and blood was coming out of the box, so a policeman stopped him and looked inside and arrested him. So he was in the High Court. He was condemned to death for the murder of his assistant. And afterwards, he was very depressed, but his lawyer said, don't worry, that I'll get you off by appeal. So Prabhupada said, this is the High Court, this is the highest court that you can appeal to. But his lawyer is flattering him, don't worry, I'll get you off by appeal. So everyone is trying to, don't worry about old age and death, we'll get you off by appeal. But there is no appeal. There's no way of stopping it. There's no way of becoming God, because we can't stop old age. We can't do anything here. That's important. Sure, people can learn how to fly like a bird in an airplane. They can go underneath the water. They can do so many different things. But they can't stop time from changing everything. And therefore, our attempt to become God is a useless waste of time. What we can do is desire to serve God. Either we're trying to become God in this world by stopping time or by trying to enjoy the material energy, or we can try to serve Krishna with his energies. Desire. And all we can do is desire. But if that desire, we take the credit for it, then we're mistaken. We're simply agreeing to become Krishna's instrument. And Krishna will, either through his material energies or through his spiritual energies, is doing everything else. And as soon as we take the credit or become attached to the results, then we're put into illusion. Yes, you're the doer. You did so much. You made so many devotees. You distributed so many books. You gave so many nice lectures. You did so much. You ate so much prasadam. But we're thinking we're the doer, but actually we're simply the observer and the experiencer and the desirer. And Krishna is the upadrastanamanta cha varta bhokta maheshwara paramatmeti chapyuto dehesmin purusha para. And yet there's another. In other words, there's another person with us. You can't get around him. You can't escape him. All we can do is forget him. And that's what the material energy is all about, forgetting God. This is the whole, as Prabhupada once said in a morning walk, this whole adventure of Western civilization, which is meant to keep people in darkness, will soon come to an end. So it's the Western adventure, especially, keep people in darkness about the fact that we're not independent. God is right with us. And all we can do is desire, and everything else is arranged by Krishna. And if we desire rightly, then it's arranged by the spiritual energy. And we desire wrongly when we're under the influence of the material energy. And our activities are material, and therefore they produce more and more karma. And if we desire spiritually, then our activities are spiritual, and they liberate us and help liberate others too. So that's our choice. That's all our choice. Either we have to surrender to God. We can only choose which way we're going to surrender to God, either favorably or unfavorably, either through his material energy or his spiritual energy. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna. This purport mentions Nawab Hussain Shah, and India was under the Muslim rule for so many centuries. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we do have some descriptions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's interaction with some Muslim rulers. Still, what would you like to say something about how the Vaishnavas saw both the Muslim rulers and Islam as the prevailing religion of the people occupying all the posts in India? It was a different religion, but Vaishnavas are very tolerant. At the same time, apparently, some historic facts are that so many were killed. Brahmanas, Vaishnavas, and temples destroyed. So did Vaishnavas complain, or did Vaishnavas somehow try to...
Yeah, they were probably the ones who were killed also. Well, there's many different rulers. Some of them were more cruel than others, and some of them were benevolent. Like Aurangzeb is not in the list of tolerant, but Sahaj Shah was the name of his father. Shah Jahan was considered much more tolerant. There was another one who was quite tolerant. What's that? Akbar. So, it depends. There's different states. Usually in the history, the most extremes are usually mentioned, because otherwise it's pretty boring hearing about people who are moderate. But you have to remember, there's a whole history of fights. The major reason why the quote Hindus didn't last very long is because they usually fought each other. They're still doing it. So the British didn't have a very difficult time. They just, two people who opposed them, they just lined them up against each other and they fought each other. So it's Kali Yuga. And even if it wasn't Kali Yuga, Dwapara Yuga didn't seem like it was doing so much better either. It wasn't that Kamsa was completely benevolent. Or to speak of Jarasandha, gathered up 20,000 kings and was going to offer them to Durga. So the history of the material world is not the history, especially in these last two yugas, of peace and prosperity, friendship and love. Look at the history of Europe, where there aren't Muslims and Hindus. Yes, that's Kali Yuga. Yes.
Another question about Hiranyakashipu's austerity. According to the Bhagavad Gita, it seems to be completely tamasic, self-destructive for some rather, how shall we put it mildly, unintelligent or impossible goal. So, at the same time, he did seem successful for a while. So why didn't they just smash him down and give him nothing? Like, for example, Kumbhakarna, he was tricked into sleeping half a year.
Well, it's part of Krishna's pastimes. He had a role to fulfill. So Krishna made the arrangements. He could fulfill that role. He was meant to fight with Krishna, so Krishna could come and protect his devotee and get a chance to fight with one of his doorkeepers. But as I said, when someone's very powerful, if you impede his austerity or do something like that, then you get the karma for it. And the demigods weren't willing to take the chance. Even when Indra killed seemingly a demon who was actually a Vaishnava, Vritrasura, he got a lot of karma for it. The history of Indra is, he doesn't get away with anything. Nor does anyone. which is surprising. I mean, sometimes it's said that as Krishna, when he met Muchukunda in the cave, and Muchukunda sort of forearm Vishnu for him, and he was in ecstasy. And the result is, Krishna said, well, you killed animals in your last lifetime, even hunting as a Kshatriya, which we understand you don't get karma for. But because you've done that, therefore you won't be a Vaishnava. I mean, you have to see Krishna directly. You're going to have to go out and do some austerity. So he left, although he was from a different yuga, and he saw the trees were just like little bushes. Still, he had to go out and do austerities, so in his next lifetime he could become a Vaishnava preacher. So here we are, Vaishnava preachers. Maybe we were part of his army. Maybe one of us was Muchukunda, for all we know. So the material world is such that you don't get away with anything. Yes.
As devotees, does it happen that some of us perform austerities in tamas? And what would be the result?
Well, I guess in a glove lemon contest. Eating 100 glove lemons to win the contest. It's pretty much austerity. I mean, sometimes the devotees go out, they work, and they get sick. They do some of the priyasas. They over-endeavor. So that's sometimes in the mode of ignorance too. They're not regulated. Anything else? Thank you very much. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande.